Welcome, everyone, to That Kingsville Podcast. This is going to be an informative podcast about what's going on in the town of Kingsville, both municipally and socially. My name is Dave. I'll be your host for tonight. With me tonight is Kevin. Kevin.
Hello.
Welcome, Kevin. And Steve.
Hello.
Welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
So essentially, we just want to have a conversation with everyone since, the pandemic's kind of kept everybody inside and talk about what's happening within our wonderful little town. Just an update at the time of recording. We've gone back out of lockdown so we can get together in smaller groups in red. So any guesses on how long that's going to last?
I'd say 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
No, I think we're going to be there for a while.
Yeah. So we're just
really. I think it's going to be red for a bit.
Hanging a phase of red. See,
April maybe.
Well, let's hope.
Roll the dice.
Yeah.
Let's roll the dice. All right. I know other regions of Ontario have gone to orange and pewter and whatever other colors. So
it's just going to disappear soon, right?
Yeah.
Magenta.
Does anybody have a magic ball? Magenta. I like that color.
I think my daughter might.
So, while COVID's still going on, the town of Kingsville has done something with their website, mykingsville.ca, in order to collect a lot of the information that's happening within businesses and restaurants in town. And they've been populating that website with updates to restaurants and other events in town. So I encourage everyone to go to www.mykingsville.ca just to check up and find out what's happening within town. If you plan on going to a restaurant, obviously you're going to get reservations and not to overwhelm, but there are other things that they are posting on that website. So it's a good resource. And again, support local because when this is all said and done, we want to make sure that we still have a town to visit.
And I think I saw too, if you're a business owner, then you're able to contact the town to get some of your information up there as
Correct.
well, right?
Yeah. They're utilizing some of their municipal resources in order to foster any of the business community's needs. So
it's nice because this time of year, it's kind of tough to be able to do a lot for a small business. So even every little bit, right? I mean, it's middle of February. These are kind of the dark days of small businessdom anyway.
Yeah, nobody's walking the streets. We just had Blizzard 6000 or whatever compounding on COVID lockdown of
Snowvid.
Ooh. Snowvid. You worked on that one all week, didn't you?
No, I think I read it earlier somewhere today.
Please don't take that claim. Don't take it. You don't want to go down with that ship. So.
I remember I was in the newsroom at Blackburn. And it was back. This is like late 2000s, and it was the first time that they had used the term Snowmageddon. and I remember looking, and the weather forecast came across the wire, and you always have like 3 or 4 paragraphs that kind of give you the rundown of what's supposed to happen, so you don't sound like an idiot when you go in the air. And the jock asks you like, "Oh, well, when's it gonna stop?" You can actually give them like a relatively real response. And the headline on it was Snowmageddon. And I called Environment Canada and I said, let Snowmageddon get by. And now it's everywhere, right? Now everything is Snowmageddon.
You figure somebody would have trademarked that because then they would have cashed in on everyone utilizing it.
Right?
Snowmageddon. Trademarked. Environment Canada. They should have. Yeah, that's supplement your government salaries with trademarks.
Yeah.
So topic 1 tonight, last week, the town of Kingsville hosted their midterm council review. And because of COVID, it was handled via a Zoom meeting, to much the dismay and or upsettedness of a lot of townsfolk. However, under the circumstances, there's not much you can do. So the council decided that a virtual meeting was what they wanted to do in order to collect this information. The intent was, at this time in 2021, is halfway through their term, they wanted a barometer to see what exactly was going right for the council and what needed improvement. So they utilized an online platform called Thought Exchange, and they posed 2 questions. 7:00 on a Wednesday, I believe it was. They had this Zoom meeting, and Mayor Santos got on, gave a preamble about, hey, here's some of the things with regards to the strategic plan that has gone right. And then COVID came in and, put the brakes on all the progress that we've been making. So here's some ideas about how we're going to pivot and adjust. And then our new CAO, Mr. John Norton, got on and gave a bit of a synopsis about what he thought of Kingsville and what he thought things could be improved or changed in Kingsville going forward, to basically start off the question period. Now, I was under the pretense that there would be a little bit more information presented. However, after thinking about what went on, this is probably the most generic way to get information without it becoming just a sounding board for everyone's frustration.
I actually didn't like the beginning, and before we get into because I have a few issues with it, but before we get into slamming it, discussing it. Can we first say that it's a great effort?
Yeah.
Like, the idea of what they were trying to do, in my opinion, I think was a good idea, and it's a good way to try and give people that soapbox that it seems like some people in town are trying to find and trying to get.
Yeah, they make social media collective groups and voice their opinions through anonymity rather regularly. So yeah, absolutely. It's about the best without it turning into a mudslinging.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, you've covered Kingsville strategic planning meetings dozens of times. I mean, they used to seem like they had them every year. I mean,
it certainly seemed like a more proactive approach than a reactive approach to anything by town and council, and that's what you hope to see, especially under the circumstances of that COVID has brought us under, when they're willing to reach out even more. And yeah, is Zoom ideal? No. I mean, you want to be there, you want to be able to look at boards and placards or whatever and get a better idea and write your feedback down. But it still shows that council isn't sitting idly by. They want to be engaged, and they want to know what the people want.
Right, exactly. What, through the next couple of years of council, do we have to pivot and adjust? I know everybody's going to be adjusting with COVID, but should they focus it a little bit more towards one avenue or not? Or really, what's the pulse of everybody's frustrations or happiness of what's going on in the town? So they utilized this online platform called Thought Exchange, where there was a QR code that you would scan and then answer some questions, provide some input. And the first question that was posed was, what makes Kingsville a great place for you and your family to live, work, and play? So you would scan this code on this website and then enter in some information. And it was a little bit technologically clunky, I found, right? Again, we're trying the best we can. But unless you were really aware of what a platform utilization was for this kind of thing, you kind of didn't get the gist right away of what it was that you were supposed to do. So they were canvassing for just free input of ideas.
And that's kind of my issue with the preamble from the CAO, is that he kind of steered a lot of that discussion, right? Because he laid out some of the things that he thought were a concern, which immediately you saw reflected in the answers from Thought Exchange.
Yeah, there was a lot of recurring themes immediately that echoed, those things. And it wasn't, I'll go back to the fact that it was a social media or an online platform. It's difficult to communicate to a mass group and kind of nurture this in an individualistic kind of environment. But I think that they should have taken another approach after John had finished his statements and said, there are other areas that we want you to provide input on, not just a blanket statement about what makes you happy about Kingsville. Right. Tell us about what you think of the town's economy. Tell us what you think about the town's housing situation. Tell us what, this and that and whatnot. And maybe rather than just hoping to generically pull all that information, you've got different segments of information about rather than just broad brushing.
Yeah, it's a tough. it's tough to go either way, right? Because if you go more specific and ask questions about the waterfront, you ask questions about Lakeside Park, you ask about affordable housing, then you're going to get the people that are just angry about it.
Well,
right?
yeah. Well, but in the first pretense was what do you like about Kingsville? I think it's a little easier to ask those pointed questions because just reading from some of the statements that were provided, it's a great place to raise a family. It's safe. We like the lakeside park. There's fresh produce. There's great restaurants. It's a place that people want to come and visit. The good things, right?
Right.
We all know these things as being residents of the town for a long time.
Do we? Because, excuse me, I feel like that I had kind of a hard time answering that one.
Did you know?
Yeah, when I first hit, and not that I don't think it's a great place, but it's like, okay, that's not, I don't generally think about positive things. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, what do I love about Kingsville? I haven't thought about this in a while.
Well.
So then, and I personally settled on climate. I love the climate. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, council, what are they going to do about the climate? I mean, they can't do a whole lot. And
Can they? I think they can.
Well, I've read that Nelson has a lot of different.
I was going to say there's a couple that'll probably tell you they can.
Yeah.
So I do think, and maybe I wouldn't have said climate after yesterday. So the snowstorm,
Snowpocalypse 2021,
Snowmageddon. So I do think that the positive side is kind of difficult to immediately think of. It forces you to think a little bit more, and I think that's why a lot of John Norton's comments were echoed, because it's the easy thing to say.
Right. And without giving away some of my suggestions under the veil of anonymity, I took a similar approach to yours and looked at the second layer of why I value my town and what resources we have and what we have available to us. Not that I don't take advantage and think of all the basics as being the most predominant and important parts, but when you peel back the layers, there are more things that we have as assets in Kingsville that do go for granted a lot of the time. Like climate, actually, is another one.
I think one of the best ways to kind of look at it is, why are you living in Kingsville as opposed to Essex or Leamington? And that ultimately there's a lot of people who've migrated here, if you will. Not to use a Jack Miner, so play on words. But I'm on a roll now.
Can you put in a Bing sound effect for us?
Every time a dad joke comes.
Every time a dad joke.
But no, and I think that's maybe the best way to look at it, because
I'm one of those.
Right.
Exactly. I came from out of town, and I took a job in Leamington and specifically chose Kingsville at the time because it felt like a small town up north.
Right. And I spent 5.5 years living in Leamington. And, there's nothing wrong with living in Leamington, but I can tell you a lot of reasons why I feel better about living in Kingsville.
Yeah. And it would have been nice, maybe in a different methodology to ask for this information. If we were allowed to meet in person, we could have kind of curtailed it or organized it in that fashion. But if we didn't, so be it.
Right.
Eventually, all of this information is going to get presented to council anyhow, and we'll see where the information collects. Actually, it was today, the day of recording here, was the last day that they'd had that platform available for any content. And I checked it earlier today, and there was about 400 comments in this question itself. So there's a lot of data that Thought Exchange kind of pulls together and uses similar themes and basically says, hey, here's your hit list of your top 15 or top 20 items. That these were the same responses from this. So now the second question. This is the tell-all of Kingsville.
Do we want to go through what the top few answers were?
For the first one?
Yeah.
Oh, I can do that. Yes. Number one. Oh no, let's go in chronological order from 5 to 1. We'll do a countdown here. It's the Kingsville countdown. What's the greatest things about the town of Kingsville? Number 5 coming in at great restaurants.
Oh,
can't argue with
can't argue that.
Number 4 coming in at lakefront property.
Okay. I mean,
we're not pushing the boat out too far here. Let's be honest.
Right.
It's pretty. Number 3, it's a safe community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 2, great atmosphere. And the number one answer about why people think, or what makes Kingsville a great place for you and your family to live, work, and play, it's a great place to raise a family.
Were those the top 5?
That was the top 5.
Like it is as of today?
Yeah, as of today.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
then it's changed.
It has. Oh, has it now?
Yeah, because I took it off the meeting.
I apologize. There's more data.
No, don't
No.
apologize.
This is- oh, as of- oh, yeah, from
I
way
wrote it
back
down
when.
from the actual meeting.
Yeah, no.
Right? I didn't know that you could
Yeah.
you could find.
Yeah.
But fresh produce was number 3.
Fresh produce has dropped. I believe that's number 6 now.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
So at
Eat
the
more
meeting, it was
vegetables.
Lakeside Park is wonderful,
Yes.
proximity to cities, fresh produce, or produce if you're American, great people, and then safety.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say there's probably 0 American listenership, but if there is, contact us.
Right. Love to hear from you.
We'd love to hear from you.
Send you a commemorative That Is Kingsville Canada flag. While supplies last.
Contact Mayor Santos.
After it comes out of quarantine.
But it's got a 2-week waiting period. Steve, that's 3 bings. 3 bings, Gary. So the second question is, again, the all-telling, overbearing question, open-ended. What would make Kingsville a better place to work, live, and play? So this is now the airing of the dirty laundry via digital formats. Now, my first comment about the way this data was collected. So Thought Exchange had an original QR code that you scanned on your phone or device, and you logged in and you answered these questions. You then had to, in order to answer the second question, scan a second QR code and enter in the same format, but in a different link, which confused everyone. Now, the first question had in and around 230 participants live while all of this data was being collected. The second one, because everyone was frustrated and upset and didn't understand the procedure, there was only about 105 people that were involved in real time giving this data and feedback, which I think it kind of stymied the flow, the generic flow initially while the live broadcast was happening. So, again, a lot of the same sentiments started pouring out, but this one was where the dirt started flying, all the mudslinging, right? All those disgruntled Kingsvillains. Steve.
I thought villains, but yeah. Villains?
Well, with this question, you could probably go villains.
Kingsvillains. The greenhouses were public enemy number 1 during this meeting and data collection. So everyone is very upset about the lights still. And everyone is very upset about holding greenhouses accountable for taxation and making sure that they're being monitored for protocols and making sure that things are being done properly within the community. So
now I should, at the beginning of this greenhouse conversation, say that I am slightly biased because my family does business with a number of greenhouses.
Yeah, we're not going to provide. We're not going to. We're not here to debate these points. We're just to present the information. Right? We're not going to throw anyone under the bus or any kind of mudslinging.
No. And you know what? And it's the only thing I find interesting is that, and it was during the meeting, it was more pronounced than it is with the numbers now. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting to see that issues with greenhouse lighting was number 1, and during the meeting, number 3 was fresh produce. Because
I was just thinking the same thing.
Can't have it both ways, folks.
Fresh produce wouldn't be number 6 if.
Right. Yeah. Now the responsibility of the light abatement is a completely different discussion, obviously, but you can't say how much you love all the local fresh produce and then complain about having greenhouses in your backyard.
Right. And I think everyone has to take everything with a grain of salt as well, because we understand there's a certain demographic within the municipality that's populating these suggestions. And I'm sure some of us are aware of that group or those groups of people. And, it probably is echoing pretty loudly when you can collect everyone's information in one format. So,
right.
40 or 50 people all say the same thing.
I think there was at one point that during the meeting that it was like 3 of the top 5 answers was something to do with greenhouse lighting.
Yeah, well, it still is. We can actually the top 3 are still greenhouse related. So, and I'm not going to deny that the light abatement isn't an issue. Things will work its way out. There's been legislation done, and obviously with COVID and with delay in getting things in order to do the light abatement, I'm not going to even profess to know why or what or who's doing what. That's not what we're here to discuss. We're just understanding that, it's still an issue, and hopefully it gets handled.
And it'd be a great topic to have a guest in for another podcast.
It would be going forward. Is that what we're going to do here, Steve?
Sounds like a great idea.
Sounds like a great idea.
It doesn't.
So going down the list a little further beyond these greenhouse issues, points like keeping continued concentration on keeping the downtown vibrant. So obviously there's some sort of sentiment within town that does value our downtown core and realizes the need to keep a downtown livable, right? We can use other neighboring municipalities as a demonstration or an example about what happens when a downtown core loses its tenants and its commerce and what can happen when we alienate our downtown core. So we're also interested in investment in infrastructure and roads. So this was another sentiment that was continuing on.
There's a lot of road projects in the budget, so it looks like they're going to be happy.
That's in a way, that's almost an easy answer because there's always going to be roads that need to be done. But to the town's credit, over the last, I don't know however many years, they put in a needs project and they go out and they identify years ahead what roads are going to need to be done when.
Yeah.
And
I think they've followed the master plan almost.
No, I think they've done a fantastic job. Yeah.
We're a little bit late as of the budget was passed a month or so ago, and had we recorded a little earlier, we could have talked a little bit about what was approved in the budget.
Are you kidding? When I was a reporter, I used to get budgets, like stories from budget, like 3 months later. Like Steve knows, like the budget is prime
next episode.
Well, it is, because as soon as even a project goes to tender, it comes back into the news. Like it's going to happen. It's going to work. And here we go.
I think we've got an assignment for Steve.
Budget breakdown.
Yeah,
it used to be done many.
It used to be, I would show up late to budget day. Steve would already be there and have reams of notes, and then I'd beg Steve to show me his notes while I'd be drinking my Tims. I'd have it between my legs, like, Steve, what happened? What did I miss?
It's like you're cheating on your calculus exam. Like, Steve, derivatives. I don't know what this is. Is this algebra? What class am I?
and then I would just follow Steve while he would go and talk to all the people from the town, and then I would steal all of his notes and then go put it on the radio before he had a chance to get his newspaper.
Exactly, because the print was only once a week. And
that's right. They'd have a budget meeting on a Tuesday, and I've got a whole week to sit on it.
Meanwhile, Kevin's reported about that, had feedback and everything.
Oh, when you're talking about it, Steve would tell me what happened. I'd go to the back of the room. I'd call it in before Steve even left the building.
I hadn't finished writing it down yet, and he knew what he was going to say.
You got the radio turned on. I was like, what? We just had that conversation.
The thought is still in my brain. Kevin, how is it on air?
The radio van's outside the parking lot with a mic boom, like, just tucked behind his shoulder blade. Like,
yeah, it's actually Steve on the air. He doesn't know it.
Steve's pen.
Uncredited. Yes. Uncredited talent.
But we can, and we'll touch on the budget quite a bit, because especially with capital projects and the way that those are tendered, and then the way that some of that costing is kind of played with in the budget sometimes. Not saying that happened in this one, but sometimes you can go through and find some things where, you know what, maybe that I think it was 1.2% tax increase ends up being a little bit different.
Sure.
Yeah. To make up some of those costs, right?
Yeah. And there's a few hot button items on this year's budget that were greenlit, the splash pad, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm actually surprised splash pad never came up in the thought exchange. I think a lot of people, maybe they understand it's happening, but
I will tell you what hydration related item did come up in the thought exchange was
Open streets?
open streets. Yes. During the rain.
Different kind of hydration, but hey, we'll be there for all of it.
Oh, you're darn right. Coming to you summer of 21, hopefully after council adopts it, there's still a sentiment for wanting a town pool.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So I understand how people think and seem to want that these things as utilities and services, but they sometimes tend not to be from Kingsville and such, realizing that there's a lake bordering pretty much the entire municipality and that a pool comes with a pretty hefty price tag.
We'll just ask the residents of the town of Lakeshore after their taxes went up 7% when they opened the Atlas Tube Center.
Yeah. So the idea of a pool, great idea. Personally, I don't think it's a necessity of sorts. We have one in Essex, we have one in Leamington. We could probably use some sort of transit service if really that was something the municipality wanted to adopt to be able to utilize those.
Well, that transit service exists already.
LTW.
Yeah.
Kevin doing promotion about LTW. The other, along with that, the need for more recreational programming was another sentiment that was echoed quite frequently within this data collection. So they want more amenities, more facilities, a senior center of sorts and whatnot. And who knows down the road what the disposition will be for Migration Hall or any of the other municipally owned assets. Maybe this will transpire over the next little while with our new director of social programming that came in, Karen Loney. So, we'll see what happens there. So, maybe it'll provide some, quality of life.
I've recently heard that there's been requests for recreation programming. I just feel like it just popped up in the last week. Honestly,
on Thought Exchange.
Have I been living under a rock? I didn't know that all these people were clamoring for recreational programming.
It's a generic term, though. I mean, what are they? Were there specific items, specific games? I mean, if you look at the last few years, I mean, Kingsville has put significant amount of money into different facilities. I know
pickleball is coming.
Bocce ball. Yep. There's different.
Jazzercise. They want jazzercise. Is that still a thing? Is jazzercise still a thing? It's probably still a thing. If it's still a thing.
No, I mean the refurbished basketball court at the Lions playground is fantastic. They did.
I think it's a little cabin fever that everyone's getting, a little claustrophobic and stuck in. They want things to go and do. And if the town says, hey, we're doing these things, this is what they will participate in.
Right.
So we'll see what happens as the reopening continues.
It just it's funny that it came up because I felt like I think I saw a post from the town that said that they were looking into more recreational programming. And then I think I saw one Facebook post about it a week earlier. And that was the first I had heard of it in years.
Well, I mean, you talk about the cabin fever.
Yeah, that's true.
You've got nothing to do really. I mean, the pond, there's some ponds not far from where I live that are utilized regularly right now. Like crazy number of skaters out there. It's fantastic to see.
We were there on the weekend.
Okay.
Around the corner, right? And seeing the number of kids out tobogganing.
Right. Exactly. But I guess if you look at it, there's a lot to do in the summer when you include pickleball and everything else. But there's not a lot to do in the winter, especially since the curling club or the curling facility was torn down. And maybe that's something that, would garner a lot of interest as far as people needing that outlet.
Like an outdoor curling rink.
If it ever got below zero for a prolonged amount of time, like it did in Snowmageddon.
Snowmageddon
21. We just need to have that. We need Nelson Santos, mayor of Kingsville, to make sure that happens every year for at least a month in order to have these things. So Nelson can make it happen because he makes everything.
How much do you think it would cost in the budget to get a snowstorm?
I don't know. Let's put it on a line item for next year's budget deliberation.
Ryan, we'll ask him first.
Mr. McLeod, yes. Yeah. The last major item that was the sticking point of a lot of Kingsvillians and villains.
Might be villains.
Villains was the lack of affordable housing. So this was one thing that's a sentiment that a lot of people are very frustrated with the recent rise in real estate prices in the town of Kingsville, thus pricing a lot of residents out of town because of affordability issues and or lack of units available. And if we look back at last year, there was a report a couple of weeks ago about how we reached record numbers of developments within the town of Kingsville.
Yes.
So the issues aren't unique to Kingsville. Like affordable housing is almost a national issue.
At least provincial.
But I would say national, because I'd assume that Vancouver and Montreal probably have similar sentiments, because the real estate market is not controlled by any municipal individual. It's free market. So
that's the thing, is when the term affordable housing is being used, are you talking about like housing prices to buy a house? Are you talking about like market rent? Or are you talking about subsidized housing? Because it's very different.
Yes.
Right?
And I believe it's all of the three.
And two of those, you can't, the town, there's nothing a politician can do to control how much a house sells for.
No.
Ever. I mean, there's, not far from my home, there's, like townhomes that are selling for $500,000, you know? So that's, I mean, the idea that the town has any control for how much someone's going to sell a house for it just isn't reality.
No.
And the town can't prescribe rent. Like they can't tell a landlord, oh, you have to do it cheap unless it's going to be subsidized.
Right. Which comes out of taxpayer dollars if we're really concerned with that, and then taxes rise and whatnot.
Right. So really, if any conversation, as far as I'm concerned, that anyone's going to have about affordable housing has to be about subsidized housing, because otherwise you can't really have a conversation.
I would say also with Kingsville developed a master plan of affordable housing a couple of years ago. I want to say maybe 2018, I believe, was when it got approved. I was a part of it at one point in time just for input. But also about how lands are zoned and how municipalities can encourage developers to incorporate unit size differences within current developments. So there is things that the town can do to encourage that type of development.
Right, but who's to tell a developer, okay, you built this 1,200 square foot condo, and you're right, you could probably sell that for $400,000, but don't. Sell it for $300,000, and we're not going to give you that extra $100,000.
Right,
and you're just going to lose it. Yeah. So, but please, like, do it that way, and it's in the official plan.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Like that's the problem, right? Yeah. Is that you can have studies, but if the market doesn't bear that cost. And it's sad. It's sad.
It was a runaway train of sorts. Like my own mother had intent of downsizing to be able to liquidate her house that she's in and move into a smaller place and retire. But the problem is those houses sell for more than what she can sell her house for because of its state, right? Like it's a vicious circle of circumstance that it's somewhat out of the municipality's control. And I think a lot of those townsfolk that are presenting that information in the survey aren't breaking it down to the three segments that you've outlined with regards to, hey, two of them are out of the control of the municipality in perpetuity.
I'll tell you, affordable housing has been on the mind of the town of Kingsville for a decade. Yeah. And I rented an apartment in 2005 and had a hard time finding an apartment in Kingsville. Mm-hmm. So it's not like this is new. You know, this has been a problem for ages, you know. And so it until the taxpayers are willing to give up tax money to go towards subsidizing housing, so it's not going to happen.
It'll be continually on the docket.
Yeah.
So
now there are, sorry to cut you off, Dave. There are provincial programs. Right. Oh, yeah. That's the thing. It doesn't have to be municipal.
Right.
And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of movement by the council to look into some of those provincial programs. Like locally, the city of Windsor is our kind of go-to for, they're the I think the term is service manager for our town.
Right. I think you're right. Yeah.
So it all goes through the, like any of that provincial federal funding for affordable housing goes through the city of Windsor before it gets to us.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, it does.
Not saying,
no, it does.
not saying that there's a conspiracy. It's
No.
just that's the actual.
No, that's the train.
The way that it works, right? So there are people at some point, at some level, in some office somewhere, deciding, okay, well, this is where we're going to have projects.
Right. Yeah. And with the explosion of development in the town of Kingsville for all the single-family homes and multi-unit complexes, and the demographic of people that were moving into the town, sucking up all of those open units, and then the real estate market increase at such an exponentially explosive rate, just kind of triggered a whole set of circumstances that did not really play into cheap, small, affordable housing availability because of market conditions. So it's there's nothing that any one individual can do, and we'll have to just take it case by case.
Do we want to talk about the one item that was, I think it was number 5 during the meeting. Maybe it's dropped a little bit. I want to get the actual wording specific.
Yes,
right.
yes.
It was. Oh, sorry. It was number 3
at the time of meeting. It has fallen off now.
More trust in town employees.
More trust in town employees.
Ouch.
Now, I'm feeling someone was scorned when they input this directly.
But it got some traction.
Did get some traction.
Which is interesting.
Did get some traction.
I mean, it must have just been the Kingsvilleans.
Kingsville.
Do I get a ding?
You get a ding or boing or whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah. Must be.
Hey, it's got to be a goose honk.
We have a perch splash, goose honk. Yeah.
It's
themed reactions.
I mean,
Gary, you can do that, right? Good.
It was kind of funny watching. Maybe it wasn't funny for the poor town employees when they're discussing the thought exchange items, because they were specifically skipping that one.
Yes, they were. I noticed that as well.
and they were like scrolling so that it wasn't on the screen.
And nobody really wants to talk about, how people have, a lack of trust or like for any one individual. So, how else are you gonna take that one head on?
No,
nobody is. You wouldn't take that.
Not at all.
You'd
Never.
avoid it too. Like, what? Nothing to see here. Keep moving.
Oh, of course. You can't address it.
Yeah.
But it's just eventually, I think, and it's not on John Norton to address. That's on council to address.
Sure.
I do think though that if enough people, and I mean, it's easy to be a troll when you see something like that on there to give it 4 stars or whatever during the meeting. But I do think that it obviously is something that some people would like to see addressed, and the town probably should,
Oh, absolutely. And I believe at the end of last year they had a town review about what services and what deficits that they had for services. I mean, in municipally, there's been some turnover and some new appointments and some new changes. So hopefully, whatever that reputation that caused that individual to input that gets addressed here with the new CAO. And
it's a very generic statement, because you could say that, okay, so one individual had a bad experience with an employee from one sector, while at another time somebody may have seen an employee from a different department. Maybe they were on their break, which they're fully entitled to, and they just happened to see them on their break and thought, oh, look, this person's not doing what they should be doing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or it could be as simple as just not liking the answer.
Yeah.
That they just called in and had a question, and the answer, the employee may be well in their right to give the answer that they did. They just didn't like it.
Yeah, it wasn't the one they wanted.
Which usually is what happens to me when I call the town.
But on the flip side,
I generally don't like what they tell me.
On the flip side, it's like you said, it provides food for thought, I think, if nothing else, for council to say, okay, well, if it's one person barking because they had a bad experience, but if there's traction, like you said, then maybe they do need to turn around and say, okay, well, where's this coming from? Is it consistently from certain areas?
Yeah, let's break it down and see if there's any substance behind it. So, overall, this exercise that was done, as we just started at the beginning of the discussion, was a very good opportunity for the council to get some real-time feedback with regards to the status of what is happening and what things that may need to be addressed in the next couple of years of their term for this council. So I hope that whatever the report that goes to council is reflective of a lot of these issues in a context that will allow them to make those inferences and decisions based upon the lack of it being airing of dirty laundry, and that, yes, we're able to actually get down to the nuts and bolts of whatever the issues are and start addressing them, rather than just, 28 people think that the lights of the greenhouses are a problem and not have any ability to continue to do anything beyond what already's been done.
Well, and I think too, especially on the negative side, we all kind of knew what probably was going to be the top 5 before the meeting even started. Oh, because it's been the same complaints for a year or two, right? But I think the interesting part of the exercise will be some of those answers around like number 9 and number 10, where maybe it's things that people haven't thought of, and 3 or 4 people thought, oh, that's a good idea, and some of those hidden gems in some of those answers, and hopefully the town doesn't just look at it as, well, here's the top 5 answers and we're dealing with them already, so we're good.
Yeah, one of those hidden gems was preserving or encouraging green spaces within town, right? It's not anything that is on anybody's, platform where they're really upset about it there's not enough parks here. Oh, I hate Kingsville. But it is an asset that, hey, if we don't continue to develop parks within our neighborhoods, we'll lose the ability to have a neighborhood park. And that's part of what I like about Kingsville. I've got a park in my neighborhood.
Well,
you
that's
do in yours.
Yeah,
and you do
but
in yours.
that's included in any new development.
Distant from our own parks.
Yes.
You, me, and to mine, and you to yours. Yeah.
But that has to be in any new development. There has to be a certain amount of green space, which is great to have.
Right. But sometimes what they've done is allow developers to use sidewalks as their green space allotment, and so that's right.
A nice green sidewalk.
Yeah.
Exactly, because they call it a trail, right? So then it becomes green space instead of having to develop a park.
Or a park being on the outside skirts of whatever the development is, rather than the more important asset in the heart of a development, right? You're right. Those are those gems that hopefully come to light and actually do gain a little bit more visibility after this whole exercise. So tonight we have Steve Ianson, who was a part of the Kingsville Reporter for 20 plus years, Stephen?
About 15 days shy of 20 years.
15 days shy of 20 years. Yeah, we are that old. Sorry, Gary. And the Kingsville
I was
Reporter,
born into it.
Yeah, you were. It was a birthright. The Kingsville Reporter was a major part of our municipality for 144 years, which, Steve, you participated for the last 20 of.
And then Nelson shut it down.
It's just, he got tired and he closed it. That was right, Steve? We got that right.
That's right.
That's right.
It?
The CTV.
I read it on Facebook.
Yes.
Oh, really? Is that what?
Yeah.
Facebook, that's like the gospel for everything that's true in the world. I don't know. I don't do Facebook, and there's a reason I don't do Facebook. It's probably comments like that.
Not a bad reason. And Kevin, you were involved on radio for, countless communities.
Steve and I sat beside each other at far too many meetings, far too many times.
Good laughs. County council was always fun.
Yeah, we'd watch the Gino Conte from CBC. And
legend. Fantastic guy.
Legend. Let me tell you, Steve, you were there at this county council meeting, I'm pretty sure. I think it might have even been budget. And we were sitting there, and Gino was off on the far, like we were in the one group, and then Gino was off on the far side, passed out cold, asleep, like absolutely, like dead asleep. He stood up and sang "O Canada," sat down and fell asleep and slept the whole meeting. Wakes up at the very end, goes around, does his interviews, I'm like, Steve would be beside me. We'd be joking around, but taking notes, doing our reporter thing. And I remember Gino went over, he did 2 interviews and left, and he scooped me. He had like the story, and I can't remember what it was. It was some like minute line item in the budget that I totally missed. Steve probably got it because Steve could steal it from him and then put it in the paper a week later. But I was so mad. Like, how did he do that? He slept the whole meeting.
It was just his persona. It made you think he wasn't with it. But.
Right. Yeah. We thought he was sleeping. He was just absorbing.
Keep your friends close, your enemies closer. I'm gonna make them think that I'm not paying attention to anything and scoop them.
Well, that's what was nice though. There really was no enemies.
No, and you know what? That was kind of the sad part of watching small papers like the Kingsville Reporter and some of the smaller outlets kind of go dark. Is that sense of community and of not just the loss to the community, and it's great, and we'll talk about it, but I think that people don't even understand the impact that the loss of that paper has had in their daily life.
Oh,
now
you hear about it all the time because there's a lot of information that doesn't get transmitted to that used to, right? We all relied on the reporter to find out about anything municipally or what's happening in the schools or any, personal interest stories. Heck, how long was Leah's column in that paper for, right? Like, when are the Robins coming this year, Steve? When are the Robins coming? I don't know.
So Steve, I have a few questions for you, Steve, but they're softballs.
I was going to say, are they softballs? Because I don't want to, no.
So I joked about it, but there are seriously people out there that think that Nelson Santos had some form of part in. So can we? How did it go down? For when did you find out what was going to happen to the Kingsville Reporter, and what do you know about why it happened that you can talk about?
I think we all sort of knew that the day could eventually come. And, obviously Nelson had other irons in the fire. I myself had prepared for that day by getting another job. And what happened was simply there was a conference call to phone into on a Tuesday morning. I was unable to call in, and so everyone did. And then right after the conference call, the regional manager called me and simply said, next week's the last edition. I said, okay. I said, that's it. Just one more. He said, yep, that's it. I said, okay, thank you. And that was it.
So Post Media didn't come through with any other elaborate explanation.
We were told due to COVID. Now, I found that interesting because at the time, the paper was relatively small because there wasn't a lot of news. But the ads we were running were full page, full color ads. The revenue being generated in the few weeks leading up to the closure, from what I could, and this is just my own personal assessment based on what we had in there, was probably far greater than what we had, let's say, in this time of last year. So if I were to give an opinion, it seemed like a weak excuse. And I say that because if you look at it, the parent company who owned the Reporter has been closing papers across the country for several years now.
So what was the turning point for you? Like, what made you think, okay, I got to go get another job? Because you say we kind of saw the writing on the wall, and I felt the same way in radio. Like I left radio 5 years ago,
right?
And kind of understanding that things were changing. What kind of triggered it for you?
It's interesting you asked this because I was thinking about this not that long ago. And I mean, for a number of years, the Sims family owned the Kingsville Reporter. They were fantastic owners, good people to work for. I believe it was in 2007.
Yeah.
They sold the paper to Can West, along with there were 4 other local ones that were part of the deal. Part of the reason that we were so enticing is because we had the printing press on site. Mm-hmm. So that was included at the time. And I think if I were to think back, that as soon as you knew you were owned by a larger company like that, there's always a risk. But at the time, digital media really hadn't taken off like it has in the last 5 years with such things as blogs and podcasts. So there was still a real need. I would say probably personally in the last 3 or 4 years, it really started to kind of, you'd hear about closures in Alberta and Eastern Canada, and you think, you know what, it's only a matter of time before we're on that list when we're owned by a large company like we were.
Well, and it was interesting they wouldn't let you guys have a proper website.
Yeah.
I mean, that's because that's an investment, right? And you would think that's where, if they were going to have a future for the paper, that's the logical next step.
And it was asked for, it was pushed for. I mean, we were willing to do the work to upload. I know other local publications have taken that route, and it's worked out really well for them. But I can't comment on that as to the reasons why. It wasn't my battle to fight, if you will, on that end.
So what is in your opinion, what's the main thing that we're missing now?
Well, since the paper closed, I've become a little bit more of a recluse, and part of that obviously is due to COVID. But I think personally, I had kind of, let me put it this way: I was asked by a good friend to kind of continue on in the journalism aspect, and I gave it a shot, and I realized that after 20 years, I needed a break, and I kind of took that break and sort of still
unplug a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm kind of still on that break.
Not now.
Welcome to that Kingsville Podcast.
And thank you. It's been fantastic to be here. But now that my train of thought is gone. Go back to the.
No, like I said, I mean, because it's one of those things that I don't want to keep bringing myself up, but like I was in the same boat, right? 5 years ago, where I just shut it off, and you kind of have to, like, you just sort of walk away, because if you watch budget and if you keep checking council agendas and you don't have that platform anymore, it can be maddening.
Yes. And I think what maybe is missing the most now is, and it goes back to an email I got from a friend, and he said something along the lines of, people won't really realize what they're missing with the paper gone until they're not seeing their kids' dance recital in, or their soccer games or baseball games and stuff like that. And I know you sent me the text joking, like, why do we run like X number of pictures of because when you think about it though, is it a dance recital? You've got probably several hundred people, and you can't highlight several hundred people.
Can I ask though, was there a quota?
Did you? No, there was never a quota. There was never a quota.
Did you have to have 57 pictures from the high school basketball game, or?
No, but let me put it this way. If Dave's kids are in there, and your kids are in there, and Gary's kids are in there, and my kids are in there, how many extra papers are we going to sell versus just Dave's kids in the paper?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. And they're probably buying 5 or 6 of them.
And that's just it. So
not even just that, but when it was my friends' kids that were in it, I bought those papers too, and I clipped them in my own.
Well, and it's interesting because the feedback I've gotten is as far as what's missing is that, people miss just cutting it out, or you'd hear stories of, my kids, or I'm still on my parents' fridge from when I was athlete of the week, that kind of thing.
It's tangible.
Yeah.
You can hold it.
Exactly. And it's, see, now you're really spurring things on. It happened on several occasions where people would say, it's one thing to pick up a device and read the paper, but I love being able to just flip the pages and sit back with a newspaper in my hands.
Tactile.
And that went a long way. That was, I'm sure, something that's being missed. Just local sports. And I know there's different venues out there, and I know they're all trying, but I shouldn't say but there's it's hard when you build up a number of connections over the years, and now you've got these startups who are probably going to grow and do really well. But we had the connections, and I'd like to think, and based on feedback I received, there was a lot of trust there. I've had people come up to me and say, I wish you were still writing in some sense, because you told both sides of the stories and you were fair. And that was always my goal. While I might have an opinion, I sure as heck did not want that to come through in any story I wrote.
Part of being a good reporter and a good journalist isn't just the information you put in the story, but what you keep out.
Yeah.
Because if you can't substantiate it, if you can't source it, if you don't have two independent sources, then that doesn't have. It shouldn't be in a story.
Right. And we would, I heard the comments over the years, oh, the rip snorter and this, Leah's column and things like that but
hey, don't hack on Leah's
column.
No,
I'm not. I'm saying that the people would kind of make little jokes about it, but those were the same people that valued that it was there.
Oh, every week I read that column just because who else has that?
Yeah.
Like that is Kingsville in a snapshot. That is everything about the small town life in print.
And
right?
she did a great job, and she loved it.
Sure.
She loved writing that column. She took more pride in that than probably any of our contributors.
Not even
not knocking anyone out. Hey, there's a few stories that I look back on that I was really proud of.
I was going to ask, that was the next one. So what are some of those?
It's interesting. I remember I did a story a number of years ago. I interviewed Randy Alsop when he retired from the fire department, and Randy's deaf. And it was a big deal for him to be part of the department. But I remember Greg Sims at the time, actually, he said to me, that might have been the best thing I've ever written. And I think that's why it stuck out more it was a really interesting story to write. The fact that he was able to be a firefighter for as long as he was, because the provincial standards are always changing. But he's a funny guy. It was a really great interview. I enjoyed sitting down with him. So then to write that story and then get the feedback that I got was really nice too. There were incidents where I met some famous people over the years. I remember interviewing part of a larger group, but Justin Trudeau before he was Prime Minister. He came to town with the then MP Susan Whalen.
That was at General Amherst, right?
Actually, this one was just at a greenhouse, I think, in town. But one that stood out too, I thought was amusing, was Ken Dryden was at Colio Winery. And one thing you never do as a reporter is you never ask for autographs or anything like that. You do your job and you're professional about it. So he did his sound bites and his interviews, and at the end he turned around and said, "Who wants an autograph?" And I'm thinking, well, if you're offering, you're Ken Dryden. I mean, Bobby Orr and different musicians. And it was interesting. I was watching a Canadian TV show on Monday night, and Colin Mockery was in it. And that was probably one of the last more famous people I interviewed.
After he filmed the movie in Harrow.
Yeah.
Sunshine, the Kiwanis camp.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? He's exactly like he looks on TV. He was funny, he was personable, and that goes a long way too, obviously.
The bygone days.
I miss them.
How? Because I know I've heard people asking this. My wife asked me this, and I'm like, you have to ask Steve. I don't know how he did it. How did you
time
choose?
Machine, Kevin. He has a time machine.
Right. So did you physically use the time machine to go back and get a newspaper and then bring it back for a photocopy? Or
yes.
Are there millions of time capsules all over Kingsville, and you would just go dig one up every once in a while?
With the bygone days, that was one of the things I enjoyed doing every week, because I found it fascinating. So for a number of years, we had a microfiche machine at the reporter office, and all the old editions of the reporter on microfilm. So I'd put in the reel, spin it to get to the date that corresponded with 25, 50, 7,500 years ago. And sometimes it was just a matter of picking headlines. Sometimes the headline told the story itself. And Other times you just have to dig a little bit deeper, but there are always certain sections of each paper where you knew where to look for some kind of interesting tidbits. Eventually that microfiche machine, I almost called it a micro machine. They come in collections of 5. The microfiche machine conked out, and I developed a great relationship with some of the fantastic volunteers at the Kingsville Archives. And I would venture over, and what I would do is I would bring it up on the screen. I would take a picture of the screen on my cell phone, and I would email my pictures to myself at work, and then I would type it up. And that was the only way I could really do it. So I had a little bit of ingenuity there to get, but
because you're not just getting a new microfiche machine.
No. We would have closed 6 months earlier if I would ask for that. But
that's a capital expense we just can't afford.
No,
Steve,
exactly.
Can you take a 50% reduction on your salary?
To keep the bygone days going.
But no, and
Leah, the bygone days you pick. It's a Sophie's choice.
But for the last 10 years, it was always very interesting doing the 25 years ago, because I would see either my name or Dave's name or people like my age, and
my wife was in it. She was so excited to show me her picture in the bygone days.
Yeah.
I'm like, now you're officially old.
You're in an archive. Yes. You're in a town.
She's like, look, I ran track when I was in grade 7. I'm like, oh, that's awesome, babe. So how old were you, and how old are you now?
but that's just it. And you realize at first you're like, oh my gosh, that's 25 years ago. That's incredible. And then, you text a couple of people, oh, remember when this happened, and their reaction's the same thing. Mm-hmm. But I remember there's been a couple of occasions where people have reached out from wherever in Ontario, because they heard a family member's name was in, or someone will come up to me and say, oh, you put this name in, that's my dad, or in
obituaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The printed obituary in Kingsville doesn't exist anymore.
Well, and that's, I find myself even scrolling on some of the local websites for the funeral homes just to, it sounds morbid, but because I don't want to, approach someone who I've known for a number of years through work and find out that, a spouse or family member has passed away, and here I am saying, oh, how's so and so. And that's a good point on the obituaries, because could be a lot of people in similar situations that can be avoided.
So do you think that Facebook pages like Concerned Citizens, like Kingsville, Ontario, do you think they exist if the Kingsville Reporter is still around? Because personally, I don't think they do. And I should say I don't think that they carry the same weight that it seems like they do, because a lot of the misinformation could be put out, right?
It's easy to do. It's easy to do because, one thing the Reporter had was it was reputable because it had been around for 144 years. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, with something in print like that, like online, I don't exactly know how Facebook works, but if I were to say, oh, that Kevin guy, he's a real piece of work, sure, you could screen cap it, but I could post it, I think, and then someone could see it and agree, but then I could delete it if I'm not mistaken, right? With the Reporter, if you make a mistake, it's there. It's there in the bygone days 50 years from now. And
and the expectation of professionalism is different.
Right, exactly. So, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that you really had to be on your game. And yeah, we made typos. They would get missed, unfortunately. The hardest thing about writing a story and editing a story is that you know what you want it to say. So, if somebody misses it after you've seen it, it happens, and it's unfortunate, but that's, and we would.
Yeah, I think to your point though too, a lot of what the Reporter did was give the official message to Kingsville, right?
It's the official record.
Right.
So the source of truth.
So the Facebook groups and the social media campaigns that we see right now are unguided, right? The Reporter was the baseline, right? There, all the municipal reports, all the events, everything is how it was told on that week's edition of The Reporter. Without that, it's up to anyone's interpretation about how anything occurred, transpired, should be done, could be done. And with social media being anonymous and us being in lockdown various stages for the last year, everybody's looking for something to complain about because nothing else is happening. And what's the best thing to do? Complain about whatever it is that's bothering you on social media to gather more fellowship and more of a push. And with a paper, it provided the baseline as to what the official report was. And without it, we don't have it.
Well, and I think too, what the disconnect is that it's one thing for a planning advisory committee to be on streaming, and for someone to sit in and watch a planning advisory committee meeting through whatever platform they happen to be watching it through. It's another thing for a reporter to be in the room where the planning advisory committee is happening, and then watch a presentation, watch the debate, and then walk outside and talk to the proponents and ask them questions about their proposal. And then after the meeting, talk to the members of the committee and ask them follow-up questions about their discussions during the meeting. Yep. Because, and Steve, you know better than I do, you sat in a lot more Kingsville committee meetings than I ever did. The actual meeting itself would be 40% of the story, 30% of the story, because you actually found out the information from the questions, the whys. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those questions don't get asked anymore.
No, and that's a good point. Union Water would be another good example where you would have to, the report's there. But then, the question period would develop the story because it's
there's no dialogue. There's no intercourse of discussion. There's nothing except for what anyone wants to put out there and take a jab at someone or at some statement, right? And it's uncontested or unsubstantiated or unvalidated.
Right. And I'd be remiss if I didn't, you mentioned my sitting in committees, but Luann Govro-Carey did a fantastic job for The Reporter for years. Absolutely. Covering council. And if you want an unbiased individual when it came to covering council, she was it. Mm-hmm. She sat there, listened intently, took the notes, and did a fantastic job for us. And a big reason why our reputation was strong was down to her, because she covered council regularly and did the job where it was just simply, this is what happened, how it happened. End of story.
And way too nice.
Oh,
you can't be way too nice, but yes, she is. She's a lovely lady. Hopefully she'll hear this and know what we think of her.
Yeah, I think it's unanimous that we all do have an appreciation for what The Reporter gave Kingsville, and without it is at a detriment to the town. Like, we lost a part of our identity, and it probably is echoed in a lot of every one of the naysayers and every one of the critics. That there's certain things that exist in a small town to give it that atmosphere, and a small town paper is one of them. So I hope over the course of this podcast, Steve, that we continue to have dialogue about what your experiences were with that, and we want you to bring certain aspects of what The Reporter was to town, albeit in a new form of media, but this is the evolution of what it's become. So,
the audio bygone days.
The audio you're foreshadowing
50 years ago.
So thank you.
Oh, no, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. I hope that print, especially small town print, can become like what the album is, the vinyl record is, where people got away from it. They started moving to CDs, then they were downloading MP3s, and now slowly people are starting to return back to the album and back to the LP.
Absolutely.
And hopefully people will at some point gain an understanding that holding a newspaper in your hand and seeing your daughter on the front page at the dance recital, or reading about things that are happening in the community, and something that you can hold and cut and fold, it's there that appreciation comes back, because it's, working in radio, I used to bug Steve a lot because it's the immediacy of radio, but the whole time I worked in radio, and any of my coworkers would have agreed that print just has something else. You know, it's at home with you.
It's a possession.
I think if you look at it, I mean, not to discredit radio or TV, but they've got a certain time limit, and they can have to tell that story in that amount of time, and then they move on to the next story, and then the next day it's something new. With us, we could tell more of the story in 400 to 500 words. Next story, and you know, on a good week, we could have 5 or 6.
That's what
really newsworthy, good stories in there.
Your timeline afforded you the ability to flush out good journalism rather than just having to be
5 sentences.
Yes, regurgitation of whatever.
5 sentences and out.
Are we good on?
Are we going to do the comment of the week?
Yes. So in closing on the podcast, Steve, I know you're not social media savvy, but I'm going to encourage you.
I'm not Facebook savvy.
I'm going to encourage you to just kind of troll social media, because what we're going to do is introduce the social media post of the week. And this week, Kevin's got a fine example. I dug deep, and I could not find anything that rivals this gem.
I was going to change mine.
Oh, no.
But no, you're right.
Don't call in an audible. That was
Can I just say that I do want to thank the person that posted on Facebook that they should check their furnace and water heater spouts, because my water heater spout last night was covered. And my water heater stopped working, and I remembered back to that post. I'm like, I bet my exhaust thing is covered. I'm an idiot. And so I went and cleared it out, and sure enough, it was. But
we have to tread lightly here, because
that came up at work today too. Somebody said the same thing.
I better go do it at my house.
So I want to make sure I get it exactly right.
I'll tell you what mine was. This was in respect to the snowstorm that we just had. Was, does anyone know when they will shovel my sidewalk? That was it. It's pretty open-ended. They. So if they haven't done it by now, I'm going to say they are not. But Kevin, I toss it to you. The social media post of the week.
Looking to purchase a microwave. Contact me.
What?
Like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, I think he's trying to change the shit. It's like, microwaves need to come to me. No longer will I go to Walmart or Canadian Tire for these appliances.
So if you are a microwave, can you give me a call? Because I'd love to buy you. I'll pay any amount of money. I've got a TV dinner.
What is it you need?
If you're cold outside, someone just put you on by the...
Bring in. We'll take good care of you. If you're one of those ones with the spinny plate on it, I'm not as interested. I just like, the standard microwave. Like,
it doesn't need... Microwave, you don't have to have bells and whistles.
No,
I just need something to warm my food up.
Call me.
Give me a call.
Do they have cell phones? Do microwaves?
They have numbers. Yeah, maybe it works the same.
I love this. I love social media for this kind of thing. I love it because in that person's idea, this was a valid request. So
right.
Microwaves, come to me.
Now, I did like the comments where people are like, here's where you can go. And then it was a link to Amazon.
Yeah. Like in COVID, like we've all been forced to order online. Like there's no secret, right?
Now, I think someone did chastise that Amazon person and say you should buy a local. Here's some local options, which of course, because that's going to happen on social media. But I thought it was interesting. Give me a shout.
Call me.
If you're a microwave,
Panasonic. I don't care. Which Magnavox, come with me. Sharp. I am not picky. Just heat up my food. And with that, this has been this week's That Kingsville Podcast. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me tonight. And tune in next time. I'd like to thank Gary Glass for production. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us at thatkingsvillepodcast@gmail.com.